Welcome back to another mathematics session. Oni McLeod is the name, and for today's class, we will be solving quadratic equation. Now, for this class, it's really a continuation from the last class. So the last class, we looked at how we can solve quadratic equations using factorization. Now, in today's class, what we'll be looking at really is how we use a formula to solve a quadratic equation. Now, you might ask, why is it that I need to know a formula when I would have already started practicing the factorization method and you're comfortable with that method? Now, I'm not going to actually tell you why is it that you need to know the formula just yet. All right, so what we're going to do is to start looking at some equations that we can solve, and we're going to try to use the same factorization method to solve those equations. All right, so I just look at one of those equations. All right, so one of those equations, I will look at it as x squared plus 6x plus 8, and that is now equal to 0. Now, let us now look at this, and we're going to be using the factorization method to solve this equation. Now, the last time we actually used the trial and error method, so that's what we're going to apply right now. Now, we go ahead and we find factors of that term, and we're going to find factors of the c term. Now, factors of x squared would have been x and x. Factors of x squared would have been x and x. Because when I multiply x times x, it is going to give me x squared. Now the factors of 8, as was mentioned the last time, 8 is a composite number. So there are more than 2 factors for 8. So we can actually write down those factors. So it is going to be 1, 2, 4, and 8. Now remember the last time we said that it's a combination of 2 factors that we're looking for. So we realize now that all of these are factors of 8. However, we cannot use 1 and 2, even though they are factors of 8. 1 times 2 will not give you 8. Neither can I use 1 and 4 because 1 times 4 will not give you 8. So the combinations that we can actually use are 1 and 8 or 2 and 4. So the combinations are going to be 1 and 8 or 2 and 4. Now, what we need to keep in mind is that we're thinking about this term, this middle term in the back of our head. Now, when I look at these two, you realize that, okay, there's nothing that I can do with those two numbers so that I get 6 from them. But what about these two? Yes, we can use these two numbers, we can do something to them to get 6 from it. So these are the two factors that we will be using. So it's 2 and 4. Now, remember the last time we say that we want the sum of the cross product, the sum of the cross product to give us the b term here. So let's multiply. 4 times x will give me 4x. 2 times x will end up giving me 2x. What do I need from these two? The sum of these two should give me positive 6x. Now, as it is, I don't need to do anything to these terms because positive 2x plus positive 4x will end up giving me a positive 6x. Okay, fine. So we're going to make that to be positive and that to be positive. Now, the horizontal arrangement, those are my factors. So I'll go back and I will write it as x plus 2 times x plus 4, and that is equal to 0. Now, from the last class, we would have discovered that when you're multiplying two factors and you end up getting 0 as the answer, then either one of them going to be equal to 0 or both. So when we reach to this stage, all we're going to do now is to say either x plus 2 is equal to 0 or x plus 4 equals to 0. So it's either or either. So either this one is equal to 0 or that one is equal to 0. Now to solve again, we use the balancing method. So we're using x plus 2 minus 2 since we're adding here. And this is equal to 0 minus 2. That goes out. So x is now equal to negative 2. Okay, fine. We can do the same thing with this. So this would have been x plus 4 minus 4 is equal to 0 minus 4. That goes out. So x is equal to negative 4. Okay, those are the solutions for that quadratic equation. All right, those are the solutions for that quadratic equation. So why should we change to something else? I know that that question is in the back of your mind, and we're going to actually answer that question. All right, so what we're going to do now is to basically look at one other quadratic equation. I'm going to look at another quadratic equation. All right, so I'm going to clean this from the board. Now for this quadratic equation that we're going to be looking at, it's now 2x squared plus 5x minus 9, and that is now equal to 0. So that's our quadratic equation that we'll be looking at. All right. Now, you're asked to solve this quadratic equation. You're very, very comfortable with the factorization method, so you want to jump straight to the factorization method. So let's go, let's try. So now we have to find factors of that term. So it's going to be 2x and x. We need now to find factors of 9. We need to find factors of 9. So the factors of 9 could be 1, 3, and 9. Good? We could also double this factor. We could also double this factor. So this factor, it could be 3, 3. So we could double that factor. Now, the combinations that we can actually use would have been 1 and 9 or 3 and 3. But at the same time, we need to take this term into consideration. So let's try use 3 and 3. So we put 3 here and 3 here. Thinking about our cross product, 3 2's will give me 6, so that will give me 6x. 3 times x will give me 3x. Now, if you notice here, there is nothing that I can actually do with these two numbers to get 5x. There's nothing that I can do with those two numbers. All right, so what should we do then? Okay, all right, let's go and try 1 and 9. Let's try 1 and 9. So we get rid of that. Get rid of that. And I'm going to place 9 here. And I'm going to place 1 here. Multiplying across, we end up getting 2x. Across here, we end up getting 9x. Wow. Am I doing something wrong here? Because there's nothing that I can do with these two numbers here to actually give me 5x. Let's change this around. We're trying to do everything in our power to get it like that. Now 9 times 2x will give me 18x. 1 times x will end up giving me 1x. Again, there's nothing that I can actually do with these two terms to end up getting 5x. So what is wrong? Is it that we're doing something wrong? Is it that we're doing something wrong here that we can't solve this using the factorization method? No, we're not doing anything wrong. No, what you would realize from this is that there are going to be quadratic equations that are unable to factorize. We can't factorize it, so therefore we can't use factorization to solve quadratic equations like these. No, you might ask, is it that the ones that we can factorize, there's no solution to it? No, we can actually solve these using the formula, which I will introduce to you in a few minutes from now. However, I want to point out to you that as it relates to quadratic equation, there are three scenarios. Three scenarios. One, you can actually solve a quadratic equation using the factorization method. Two, you can solve it using the formula. Yes. Three, you can solve it using the completing the square. We looked at those, all right? Now, the three scenarios that I want to bring across to you is that one, there's a case where you can solve a quadratic equation and you get two solutions. We mentioned that in the last one. You can solve a quadratic equation and end up getting two solutions. You can also solve a quadratic equation and end up getting one solution. There is also a third scenario where there is quadratic equations that you will not be able to solve. Well, let me say at the CSEC level, you won't be able to get any solution or any real solution for those types. So for that type of quadratic equation, you're not expected to encounter that at the CSEC level. So we're saying any quadratic equation presented to you at the CSEC level, we should be able to solve them, whether we're going to get two solutions or one solution. No, in this case, we cannot use factorization to solve it. So therefore, what we're going to be looking at now is the quadratic formula. So the quadratic formula here looks like this. X is equal to negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now, you might be saying to yourself, how is it that we will actually remember this thing? How is it that we will actually remember that this formula? I had the same concern while I was doing CSEC math. That was the first question I asked myself. However, I can assure you that for the first couple of times, when you're going to write this thing down, you might have to look in your book to remind yourself of the formula. But if you're practicing and you practice it a couple times, this will be in the back of your head. You don't need any book to look at, and you will know the formula. So just by practicing, this sticks up here. All right. Therefore, let's examine the formula. Now, here they say x is equal to this lovely thing here. Now, if you notice inside of this formula, you have A, you have B, and you have C. Those are the letters that we have inside here. Also, if you go back to the general form if of a quadratic equation, it looks something like this. Ax squared plus bx plus c equals to 0. So this is our general form. Now, if you notice here that a is the numerical coefficient, a represents the numerical coefficient of the square variable. And I say square variable and not x squared because it's not all the time you will have x in it. So a is the numerical coefficient of the square variable, while b is the coefficient of the variable to the first power, and c is your constant term, that term in the quadratic without any variable attached to it. So in order for you to solve the quadratic equation using your formula, the most important thing for you right now is to be able to identify the value of A, the value of B, and also the value of C. If you can identify those, then you should not have any problem whatsoever. All right? Now, let's see if we could now use the quadratic equation, sorry, the quadratic formula to solve quadratic equation. Now, what I'm going to do is that I'm not going to start with this one. I'm going to start with the one that we did before. We got some answers. We know the answers for the ones that we did before. It was -2 and -4. So what we're going to do is to use our formula just to see if we would end up getting those same answers. So let me just erase that. And here it was x squared plus 6x plus 8, and that is equal to 0. Now, let us now go ahead and we want to identify our A value, our B value, and our C value. Now, some of the time I find that students tend to have difficulty identifying a particular coefficient, So I just want to explain a little about numerical coefficients for you. Now, if I should give you, say, 7p, this is a term. Now, 7 is connected to the variable here by a multiplication sign. 7 is connected to p by a multiplication sign, because we could have written it as 7 times p. Now, 7 represents the numerical coefficient, while p represents the variable. So 7 represents the numerical coefficient, p represents the variable. So as I said to you, the numerical coefficient now is that number that is connected to the variable by a multiplication sign. All right? So the numerical coefficient is that number that is connected to the variable by a multiplication sign. But very, very important is that you need to understand that the numerical coefficient, it actually indicates to us how many of that particular variable exists. How many of that particular variable exists. In this case, it is 7p. So we're saying there are 7 p's up there. So if I put this and I say 2a, the numerical coefficient here of 2 is telling us that we have 2 a's. So we could even write it as a plus a. And we know that repeated addition is the same thing as multiplication. So we could actually write it like that. If I write down 5y, then that is telling us that we have 5 y's up there. Good? Now, let us get down to the meat of the matter now. If I should put, say, x, if I should put x there, the question is, how many x do I have right now? How many x you're seeing? Yes, you're correct. We're seeing 1x. It simply means that since the numerical coefficient indicates how many of the variable exist, and we're only seeing 1x, it simply means that this could be written as 1x. So we don't need to have to write it when it is 1. Okay? You don't need to write it when it is 1. So if you see the variable like that, without a number attached to it, then we should know that the numerical coefficient is 1. We don't know what x represents right now, but we know that the number that is attached to it is 1. One of the common mistakes that students tend to make is that every time they see x, they say, oh, x is 1. No, x is not 1. We don't know what x is right now. We know for sure that the numerical coefficient, however, is 1. No, so in this case, when I look at that, I see the x squared term. Now, how many x squared term do I have there? Yes, we have one x squared term. So in this case, I could have represented that with 1. All right, just helping you to better able to identify your numerical coefficient up here. The A value, B, and also C. So when I look at that, I realize that A is equal to 1, B is equal to 6, and C is equal to 8. Now, all we're going to be doing now, since we identify those values, we're now going to substitute those values into our formula, and then we work that out, and that should give us our answer. So let's go. Now, we start off by doing this. X is equal to, I put in my negative sign here, I'm going to open my bracket, and then I'm going to go over here to look for the value of B. The value of B there is 6, so I'm going to put my 6 right inside here. Plus or minus, this is now going to be B squared, so notice here, this is going to be 6 squared minus 4 times A, which is 1, so I put my 1 there, here, times C, which is 8, so I put my 8 there, all over 2 times the value of A, which is 1, so I put my 1 there. Okay, very good. So going on fine. Going down here now, so it becomes x equal to, that's negative 6, plus or minus, when I square 6, I'm going to get 36 minus, now 4 ones will give me 4, 4 eighths will end up giving me 32, and that now is all over 2. Still have some working out to do, so let's go ahead. So we end up with x is equal to negative 6 plus or minus square root. Now here, we're going to work out what is underneath the square root sign. So 36 minus 32 will end up giving me 4. And that's all over 2. All right. So let us just clean this part here. And we will just take this up. All right. We're going to take that up there. So now we have negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 4. The square root of 4 is going to give us 2. So I can now write it as x is equal to negative 6 plus or minus 2 all over 2. Now, when you reach to this point here, notice here it says x is equal to negative 6 plus or minus 2, plus or minus. So the fact that they're using the word or, it suggests to you that it should be separate. The fact that we're using or plus or minus 2, you realize that they are separate. All right, so we are going to separate them now. So it's going to be x equal to negative 6 plus 2 over 2, or we're going to have x is equal to negative 6 minus 2 over 2. So all we need to do is to work out both situations now. Now here, negative 6 plus 2, you owe 6, you have 2. So you're going to end up paying the 2 and still owe 4. So it's 4 over 2. And this will end up giving us negative 2 for the answer. Good. So x is equal to negative 2. And we got that for the answer when we did our factorization. Here, when I work this out, negative 6 minus 2, that is going to give me negative 8 over 2, and negative 8 divided by 2 will end up giving me negative 4. So there we have it. The values of x would have been negative 2 and negative 4, just as how we got it when we did our factorization. So I actually use that particular equation just to prove to you here that the formula, it works. All right, it might seem a little bit longer, but it's very, very important for you to understand that, understand the formula, because as we saw before, it's not all those equations can be solved using factorization. So with that now, using this to kind of build a little bit of confidence, we're now going to go back now and solve that other equation that we could not use factorization to solve. Okay, so let's go. Now, for this equation, we might need to have our calculators. So just let me check for my calculator and have it ready right here. Okay. So the equation that we actually looked at was 2x squared plus 5x minus 9, and that is equal to 0. Now, there's no need for us to go and try with the factorization because we already proved that it cannot be solved using the factorization. So what is it that we need to do now? We need first to identify our A value, our B value, and our C value. So that's what we're going to identify first and foremost. So I'm just going to put it right here. So A is equal to 2, correct? B is equal to 5, while C is equal to, now you have to ensure that you look at these things carefully, because some person might just say that C is 9. But in this case, C is not 9. C is actually negative 9. So you have to pay close attention to those. So that would be negative 9. All right. Now, since we now know what the values of A, B, and C are, then we can now substitute those values into our formula. So let's go. So we have now x is equal to negative. My bracket, I go and I search for B. You realize that B is now going to be 5 plus or minus square root of 5 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 9. All right? All over 2 times 2. So all we did was just to replace those letters with their numerical values. All right? So let's proceed. So now we have x is equal to, this gives me negative 5 plus or minus square root of, this will end up giving me 25. Now, because I don't want to actually just jump any step, I want to show you something. When you're working out what is underneath here, you have to pay close attention. So now we end up with negative 4 times 2, sorry, negative 4 times 2. Or let me put back my minus sign because I want to show you something. So it's going to be 4 times 2, right? Which gives me 8. And then it's now 8 times negative 9, which end up giving me negative 72. All right? So 8 times negative 9 will end up giving me negative 72. But notice here that now we have the two negative coming beside each other that we need to write as one sign. So the negative of a negative, yes, by now we should know that that now becomes positive. Good? and that now is going to be over 4. So moving along, it's now x equal to negative 5 plus or minus square root of, this now will give me 97 all over 4. 97 over 4. Now you will realize now that 97 is not a square number. So in this case, can we just use our calculator? Yes, you can just punch your square root sign, 97, and that will give you approximately 9.8488 and some numbers going along. Now, when you're going to round off, in order for you to be, what should I say, in terms of accuracy, I want you to round off these numbers to at least 3 significant figures. At least 3 significant figures. So when I get my answer here, as it relates to the degree of accuracy that we're going to be getting, I want you to round your numbers to at least 3 significant figures. So now we're going to end up with x equal to negative 5 plus or minus, that would have been 9.85, correct to 3 significant figures, all over 4. So x is equal to negative 5 plus 9.85 over 4. Now if you notice here that this is negative and we have a positive here, so we should end up with x equal to 4.85 divided by 4, right? So 4.85 divided by 4, and that will give us that x is, and I use my approximation sign because what I'm going to write down is not the exact value. So x is approximately equal to 1.21, correct to 3 SF, correct to 3 significant figures. Now we need to do the other solution. So x is equal to negative 5 minus 9.85 all over 4. In this case, x is going to be equal to negative 14.85 over 4. So let's work that out. 14.85 is equal to, so in this case, x is going to be equal to, or approximately equal to, negative 3.71, correct to 3 significant figures. So that's how we would go about solving a quadratic equation that we're unable to use factorization to solve. Now, all I'm saying to you, students, is that for both factorization method and the formula, the most important thing is for you just to keep practicing. Just keep practicing. Now, what I did when I was preparing for my CSEC exam, if I get a quadratic equation to solve, if I try my factorization method and it works, I would not leave it at that. What I would do next is to use my formula. And because I know that the formula should give me the same answer, then I am actually teaching myself. And if there's anything that is going wrong, then I could actually pick it up. Because if I'm not getting the same answers, it simply means one of the methods I will be taking some wrong approach to one of those particular methods. So I encourage you, this is not beyond you. All you need to do is just to practice. Just keep on practicing. Now, this is where we'll have to end today's session. So I look forward to seeing you for our other mathematics session. Have yourself a wonderful rest of the day. See you soon.